Morning, everybody. Tim Imholt here. Wanted to talk a little bit this morning about fiction and fiction writing, which is sort of the point to my channel, or fiction reading, and authors who get too close to reality for comfort. So, a lot of times people say, "Oh, good fiction needs to be believable. It needs to be something that I can relate to," and I agree with all of that. There are a number of books out that came so dangerously close that we kind of look at them like, "What the hell did this guy know?" Right? So, one of those that's sort of much older now is a book called Rage by Richard Bachman. Richard Bachman is a pseudonym for Stephen King. It was actually written by Stephen King, and he put it out under the name Bachman. Rage was the story of what, according to Stephen King, was the most horrific thing he could think of. It was a kid that brought a gun to school and started shooting people. He thought it was a scary freaking thing to do, so he put it in a book. And then when it started happening, you can't buy a new copy of that book, or you couldn't for a long time. I don't know if you can now, but for a long time it was pulled off the market. And you can find used copies of it around. It's in the Bachman books, which is pretty easy to find. But anyway, then you go to Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy was like notorious for this. He was so close to reality, and then eventually things he wrote might become reality. Including one where he decided that a great weapon for somebody who's outmatched by the United States and doesn't have enough money to really fight us is to take a commercial airliner, take it over, and fly it into a building. He flew it into the Capitol and killed the Senate, a bunch of politicians. You wound up with basically Jack Ryan trying to rebuild the entire government, which was an entertaining story, but still fiction. But then years later, 9/11 happened, right? And people start flying airplanes into buildings. And there's some talk that the one that was crashed by passengers fighting back was actually aimed at the cap or going to hit the Capitol or the White House or something. Nobody knows for sure, but it was headed towards Washington D.C., so it was some vital government target as opposed to the one that hit the Pentagon. And so when I started writing, I started thinking about those sorts of incidents, right, where writers said it looked at reality and said, "What if?" And one of the things that I was working on at the time, because I am a physicist, I was working on a project to try to detect smuggled nuclear weapons in our shipping and logistics system. And my first thought was, is this really a problem? And then I started looking at it, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that I see more than it's going to keep me up at night. Um, so I put my sort of weird hat on after I left that project, and I said, if I was really going to sneak one in, how would I do it? And can I figure out how to do it from unclassified information? And I said, well, sure, here's how I would do it. And that became this book right here of what happens when someone actually obtains these weapons and wants to use them to target us. And the somebody I chose for that was Iran, because they were the only ones that had enough money to really pull it off. They probably have the right scientists to pull it off. And they certainly have access to the right materials. So I was kind of like, okay, if it was going to be a country, it would probably be them. And I said, okay, if I was going to use them, what would I do? And I kind of picked some targets, and I said, okay, you would have to do this, but under what conditions would I feel comfortable? And the conditions I thought would be comfortable would be where, the United States in just political chaos, and we can't agree with anybody else. We're not worried about the rest of the world because we're too chaotic here. We're just not paying attention. And the president's fighting with so and so. Like, it was just political chaos everywhere, and the country's divided, and we're kind of divided right now. Um, and one of the things that hit me this morning was a friend of mine sent me a news article that said Iran is coming close to nuclear weapons, or closer than we ever thought possible. And I was like, oh, good God, here we, yeah. Because for years I was like, no, it probably wouldn't happen. Iran probably wouldn't be that stupid. And then sure enough, we have crazy crap all over the Middle East, and Israel attacks them, and next thing you know, here's another article about, they're coming close again, or considering putting these things together. Um, so while I do hope that this doesn't become this book over here doesn't become reality, because the targets I chose were too close to where I live in one case, that let's just hope it doesn't happen. But I do hope that if you have read this book, or you do see the video and you think about it, you think, or if you've read the book, you look at it and you think, hey, that actually is realistic. That was kind of what I was shooting for in this case. And I think that's what a lot of writers are shooting for. And if you are a writer, that to me is what sort of separates pulp fiction, which there's a great place for, from sort of bigger fiction, or the Tom Clancy's or the Robert Ludlums. And I'm not putting myself in that same category, but the book has done pretty well. But to me, that's the difference between sort of pulpy fiction that I read and I enjoy, but I don't necessarily remember in 5 years, and then the one that kind of sticks with you. And that's kind of what I was going for, was the fiction that sticks with you. I do hope that Iran doesn't look at it as a how-to manual, because the stuff I put in there probably would still work to smuggle things through the system. Because man, I'm 100% sure, at least when I wrote that, that would have worked to get him in the country. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about this morning. I hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Click like, subscribe, follow, check out the rest of the channel. Growing on YouTube. We're not going away over there. Twitter, of course, we're always big over. I'm sorry, X. Of course, I'm always over there. Uh, Hope to talk to everybody soon. See you on the next video.